Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Future AI Horizons, Thriving in a Transforming Digital World. We have a wonderful panel of experts with us today who are super keen to share their collective insights on what is happening across the data and analytics and AI landscape. To find out more about our experts, their detailed bios are on the event page. But as we only have 30 minutes with you all today, we're going to get stuck right in after two super quick housekeeping points. First one is please put all your questions in the chat. We encourage lots and lots of questions, and we'll try and answer as many of them as we can. And then for translations, there are detailed instructions in the chat on how to access your preferred language. So to kick us off, I wanted to address my first question to you, Ingo. You've been a data scientist now for around 25 years. How are you seeing traditional machine learning being impacted by Gen AI technology?
Well, that's a good one. Hi, everyone. I think there's really three main changes we can see when it comes to Gen AI and how it changes machine learning, but also data analytics in general. So the first one is the obvious one. There is a lot of new use cases you can solve with generative AI as a technology. So think about, for example, in comparison to traditional machine learning, where you can predict a number or maybe a class of things, like does it belong to A or does it belong to B? With generative AI, you can really produce complex outputs. As many of you are aware, you tried maybe ChatGPT or other technologies. And so you can see that there's a complex text which can be produced, or an image, or think about like a video or a musical composition. It's like there's literally no limit here. There's no boundary of what you could imagine which could be produced. So that opens up new use cases which can be solved. Use cases where typically before there was a human being needed for. That's the obvious big change, but it is a big one because I think we as analysts, we still kind of like try to grasp the wide area of opportunities we have in front of us right now. And we are still kind of like experimenting, exploring at this current stage. The second point I would like to point out is acceleration. So in addition to new use cases we can solve, we can also accelerate those new use cases, but also existing ones, or existing problems we've been solving in the past. So think about like a lot of time is spent on data engineering, and instead of like creating manual workflows or writing Python scripts or whatever approach we did in the past to, for example, enrich our existing data with other data sets and make the data more meaningful, with generative AI models, we can actually get to an enriched data set by just asking the right prompt. And so, for example, like I have a list or like a data table consisting the different countries of the world, and I would like to add the GDP and the population size for each of those countries. So before I need to find this data somewhere, enrich it manually. It's a lot of manual work, and now I just like write the right prompt and I get this added to my existing data. So there's acceleration, which is the second big change. But the third one, I think, is the biggest one, and we only start to grasp really how big this one is. And that's, I personally think, that generative AI will completely replace many, many machine learning applications where we use traditional machine learning approaches for solving our use cases. Think about most Gen AI models not so much as a content generator. Think about this as something which can produce complex output, but also understands a lot about our world. This sometimes we refer to this as the world model. So think now about like any use case where you used traditional machine learning in the past. And now imagine that you could skip the whole phase of training data collection and training a model because the model already understands how this world functions. So instead of creating or collecting data about churn cases and then training a machine learning model, hey, this is a loyal customer versus a not so loyal customer, we could jump straight into application phase and just ask this world model, this generative AI model, what do you think? I have some information about some client here. Do you think this client is going to churn, yes or no? And we did a lot of experiments, literally dozens of different use case and experiments, some of them where this word model would help a little bit more, some of them where the word model is a little bit less helpful. But overall, what we have seen is that for many use cases, actually, it's not just like skipping the training phase. That's a huge advantage, but also that a large language model, which has a deeper understanding of the world already, also is able to produce better predictions. So versus like a manually trained machine learning model. So as I said earlier, three big changes, new use cases, acceleration, and I think for many use cases, traditional machine learning will be completely replaced. And that's a pretty big impact.
So three pretty huge points you made there, Ingo. So another question for you, in terms of how people can implement Gen AI today, what do you think are the biggest blockers?
One is people still struggling wrapping their head around and really fully embracing all the new opportunities. And I think that will still take some time because we as human beings sometimes tend to be a little bit slower adopting to change. And this is just what it is. But every single day I meet new people who see all those opportunities and start embracing them. So that's great. The other one, obviously, is there is new problems with generative AI methods. Like we all know about hallucination. There may be governance problems. What about IP infringement? All those problems, I think we will get to the bottom of it, and we will really find good solutions to all of them. So I'm not too concerned. But when it comes specifically to using generative AI models for data analytics and machine learning, I think there's one last big one, and that is that ironically, those generative AI models have been trained on human produced data. We were calling them language models because they are trained on natural language produced by humans. Now, the irony here is that they are really very well able to understand humans now, but they sometimes struggle with understanding the data because data often is coming in a somewhat obscure form. And if you're trained on human language, you struggle a bit like understanding with understanding the data in its technical form, like many humans struggle with understanding the data in the technical form. So we need to find better ways to explain what data we have, what the data is about, what's the semantic meaning behind the data. And that really is something where, for example, knowledge graphs can really be helpful, adding like the semantic layer on top of data. And that really is key to unlocking the power of generative AI for modern data analytics.
Um, okay, another interesting point, and I think we can now move on to Sean to ask you a couple of questions around what Ingo mentioned in terms of there's challenges to face perhaps using new technologies like Gen AI if you don't have semantic meaning or connections there. How do you think technologies like knowledge graphs are changing that?
Thank you everyone for being here. Well, Ingo has already begun to put his finger on it, but the way I think about the semantic layer um, is really it's the bridge between the world knowledge of the LLMs that have been trained on the vast amounts of human produced content and not only human produced content, but an enormous amount of natural language for the most part, and um, and enterprise data, which is generally buried underneath layers and layers of arcania and complexity, and it's kind of funny and ironic as Ingo mentioned that it's the human readable version of that data that makes it accessible to, or is the key, the Rosetta Stone of making all of that enterprise information available. Now, knowledge graphs are not new, and nor are semantic layers. And the reason that we've been building them, and I've been working on it for a couple of decades now, the reason we've been building them is to essentially abstract data away from the underlying sources and formats and strange things application developers did to create data, and to turn all of that into something that users of the data would understand. And those users, up until a year or two ago, were human users, and they wanted to see the information described using their language. And that's what ontologies are for. And the ontology language that we use at Altair is called OWL. It's a W3C standard, and it's been around for decades. It was something that Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, did after he invented the web. He went on to the semantic web, and so we use that standard to describe data. And we've been doing that and spent an awful lot of time building systems to do that for decades. Along comes LLMs, into the scene. GPT-3 really was where we turned a corner. And suddenly we find all of that work has made everything we've done accessible to the LLMs, and the ontologies are interesting in that they have a human readable component and a machine readable component. The machine readable components are URIs; they look like URLs, and each one uniquely represents a concept, and they are tied to human language descriptions of those concepts, and so when we build things like Copilot, which I've been working on, we're essentially passing that mapping of human readable to machine readable to the LLM, and the question from a user comes in, and that question can then be turned into a machine readable query, which we can pass to a more primitive system, if you like. So the semantic layer is really the Rosetta Stone that unlocks all this value for us. The good news is we have a lot of technology already in the bag to build and transform our systems into that, into those representations that the LLMs will be able to understand.
So I have a second question for you, Sean. You're a chief scientist. You specialized in graph technology for many, many years. What is your vision as a chief scientist for knowledge graphs and Gen AI? Like, how have you been working with customers to bring this to life?
So it's a very exciting moment, and I'm very glad to be here still, towards the end of my career, to have this technology, which I would never have dreamed could exist, in any time soon. And here suddenly we're there, and it turns out knowledge graphs are having their day. In the last sort of, I don't know, 12 months or so, there's been an explosion of interest in knowledge graphs because they do truly unlock a lot of the value of data. And people are finding that the techniques that people were initially using to bring enterprise data in, and this is a technique called RAG, and there's many variations of it, wasn't quite enough. And so they turned to knowledge graphs for quite a few different reasons and different techniques that can all be combined in solutions to essentially provide a conceptual backbone to data when we want to generate context that essentially grounds an LLM in a way that prevents it from creating hallucinations, and that's called graph RAG. And there are many techniques. One technique is to use LLMs to bring data out of documents, for example, and put them into a graph. Another one would be to essentially describe the contents of the documents as a interlinked set of nodes and relationships, and use that to when you're asking about something or someone asking the graph about that thing, and then fetching all the surrounding information and packaging that up and giving that as context. Or what we're doing with some of our customers with our Copilot is where we're actually generating queries, graph queries that can essentially hallucination free and with access control allow you to access the data that we've put into the graph, described with an ontology, and use it to answer questions. So, one of the ones we just brought online this last week is a clinical trial operations system where users can, instead of asking IT and waiting a week for a dashboard to answer some question, can get a mini dashboard in the context of a chat that they ask a question. Next thing, they've got a table or a chart that's answering that question from the data. So this is an example of one of these solutions happening and the early value that customers are getting from this. So it's a most exciting time for us as we bring all these technologies together.
It sounds super interesting, like just overall knowledge graphs having their moment and helping people to make their data easier to find, use, and understand.
That's exactly it.
So moving over to Natasha, like Ingo and Sean, you've been data scientists for many years, worked across many industries. I'm curious to hear your opinion on how you are seeing Gen AI revolutionize analytics right now.
Well, generative AI is a fascinating subject to explore and to talk about. And I think we are actually witnessing something extraordinary happening where science fiction is becoming reality. So hopefully what we share today with many of you will inspire you to tackle your business challenges with the generative AI. And there are two aspects or two sides of generative AI to talk about. Ingo already mentioned that automation or efficiency. And the second aspect is innovation, where magic things are happening, because generative AI unlocks possibilities we couldn't reach before, creating new solutions in even entire ecosystems that redefine actually what we thought it's possible. And Ingo mentioned that efficiency through running, say, churn or retention campaign. The same holds for sentiment. We don't need anymore to train models. We can use an LLM. So everything is in our hands as a marketer, for example. Another example, say, for field experts, uh, uh, inputting business narrative into AI and getting simulated data almost instantly. So basically, something which previously was frustration and the barrier suddenly becomes commodity with this generative AI. And that's a magical aspect of innovation. So uh, envisage a creative AI partners, for example, adaptive self-learning and even emotionally intelligent. So then available 24/7 and who can brainstorm ideas, create trusted content, even challenge our perspectives. So that blend of human intuition and generative AI capabilities working in a synergy. So generative AI is a really powerful catalyst, reshaping industries and creating new job opportunities. I think everyone should think about how their current roles will change in a couple of years' time. Say, for example, data scientist as my role. I see myself probably as an AI orchestrator, combining different AI techniques into a powerful business symphony, like a good chef combining tasty dishes with a few ingredients, or collaboration architects harmonizing human intelligence with generative AI.
So yeah, like a full-on revolution happening, like you said, lots of things to unpick there.
Exactly.
Just thinking, because I know you also work in the field, you work with customers. In your opinion, what do you think are the most impactful uses of Gen AI right now?
There are probably few groups of those use cases. So first to mention is probably this simulation-driven design, the most exciting area at the moment. Imagine creating a car, a bridge, building a drug, tasty food, anything really. So double simulations to design and to predict their test performance in real world conditions before any prototype is built. So, this is the new way of speeding product design and transforming industries. Say in financial sector for helping Gen AI, helping fund manager to create synthetic portfolios and simulate market conditions. So really a game changer of innovation and also reducing the risks. Another aspect or group of use cases, this we talk more about that these days, personalization at scale. Another breakthrough in retail, in healthcare, for example, for individual treatments to match DNA code with the health records, or in education, adapting learning paths to individual needs. There is also this huge area of use cases, knowledge discovery for both academia and industry, in research and development, creating new products, new drugs. There is, I think, prediction in the couple of years' time, 30% of new drugs will be discovered using generative AI. And probably my favorite use case, this human Gen AI collaboration, essential for creative industries. But I think as we adopt this technology, there is something very important to think about. That's a trust in AI generated content, which is critical. We all know it can be misleading. So transparency and fighting those biases will be critical for leaders. So to wrap up, generative AI is driving really rapid change, and companies that embrace it now will shape the future. So if I can leave you with a single message today, let that be start small, but start now and scale fast later. Because don't forget, the future belongs to those who act promptly.
Yeah, an important point, and I'm sure one that many people are going to think about now. So moving over to Christian, last but not least, we've heard from the data scientists and the chief scientists a lot of discussion around the actual technology and how the market is changing and developing. But I wondered if you could share your thoughts on what organizations need to do to embrace these new technologies fully.
Yeah, I think this discussion's been really good because I think it's talked a lot about where we can go with the technology that is coming out today. I mean, there's a lot of movement in the market. You can see a lot of advancement. Heard a lot of excitement today around generative AI and knowledge graphs. And I think it's important to start thinking deeply about how these things can be integrated directly into the business. And I think it's important to start thinking about the technologies that you would need in order to implement these things effectively. Simultaneously, I think it's important to think also realistically. I think you have to think about the vast amounts of challenges that sometimes existed at organizations that might hold you back from being able to do these things effectively, and then adopt technologies that simultaneously overcome these fundamental challenges and accelerate you into being able to use next generation and modern technologies like generative AI, like knowledge graphs. So I think when I think about the right prudent strategy for organizations, it's to think holistically about the data architecture, to think about the ways that you can overcome the fundamental challenges in source complexity and system complexity, in overcoming silos of data and connecting those silos and creating new relationships between those things, and getting data out of unstructured and semi-structured formats into formats that are more easily analyzable by machine tools. And then implement the AI technologies that can actually harvest the information that comes from those now combined data sources into one thing. And I think that it's easy to take, or well, it's easy. It's easy to think that you might be able to take 50 different tools from 50 different vendors and start to cobble these things together in a unique way. And one open source tool over here that maybe connects to this other open source tool, but maybe you lose something a little bit in the middle. And I think it's more important to think a little bit more holistically. And I don't think you want to be locked into a particular vendor, but at the same time, I think it's good to think about how to leverage the connections that exist between existing tools very effectively and adopt a platform that can maybe accomplish both of these sides, both the underlying fundamental complexities in the system, but simultaneously the advancement that can come from implementing generative AI at organizations and implementing knowledge graphs and explaining your data in a human readable way so that both generative AI models can understand it, but simultaneously so that your business users can understand it. And I think this is, as everybody has already said, this is a revolution in data analytics, but it's also something that is an evolution at the same time, right? I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be this enormous rip and replace type of a project. It can be something that's more fundamentally evolutionary and still get you to the dream of being able to implement these efficiencies through technology in the end.
All super interesting points. And I do have a follow-up question. We know from working with customers and large organizations, there's so much focus on value. So what do you think overall, if organizations do all the things you mentioned, what is the value, what is the overall impact?
Sure. So I think the overall impact to organizations when they implement a system that can actually bring these things together, bring together knowledge graphs and data fabric technologies and AI platform technologies and generative AI, what they ultimately get to is becoming a data-driven organization. They get to a point where they can weave data into their everyday decision-making process. And then they can also, very importantly, they can also take AI and automation and build efficiencies into the organization so that they can have cost savings and acceleration of revenue. One particular example that we had where we actually were able to do what's like a price optimization project for a particular organization. And by just doing price optimization, they were able to increase revenue by $50 million. We think they could be even more today. Like, this is the advantages of the value that you can get out of AI projects in general is enormous. And those can only come when you implement a system that combines the power of something like a data fabric, combines those fundamental underlying technologies that solve the source and system complexity with the power and acceleration of an AI platform, bringing together notebooks and Python and SAS and OML IDEs and low code and no code pipelines and the Copilot that Sean was talking about, and AI agents, and then bringing it all together in a platform that actually can operationalize and control each one of these things, so that you can trust the output of the generative AI model, of the ML model, and iterate on it and become LLM agnostic. If you have low code pipelines, for example, switching out the LLM from Gemini to OpenAI to Anthropic is as simple as changing a block. And I think that's very important for the safety and security of your business, that you have these types of controls and this type of flexibility. And in order to actually get to the point where you can see the value, the efficiency gains, the data-driven decision making, you need a platform that it combines knowledge graph and AI technology, so that your generative AI knows your data as well as your people do. You need it so that one person who may wear multiple hats can take the data from the very beginning, understand what it means, and develop an entire process, deploy it, and operationalize it all themselves, all in one place. I think that's unparalleled ease of use. I think you want a platform that brings together the entire business. It brings together people who are on the business side, people who are on the data side, and allows them to collaborate together in one place, so that together they can build impactful projects for the organization. And I think, as Natasha mentioned earlier, critically, this overall platform needs to be able to govern the entire data ecosystem. It needs to be able to control who can access what data, what pipelines they can access, what they can build, and what they can impact, and what generative AI models can impact. I think the only way to do that is by bringing together these different elements, which maybe were previously separated in the market, from data fabric to AI platform. And I think that's what we're doing here at Altair. We're bringing it together in our platform, Altair RapidMiner. And that's our vision for the future, is really bringing these things together in a way that can transform businesses. So that's what I'm excited about. And I'm definitely just as excited as everybody else about bringing these things together.
Yeah, I know that everyone at Altair is excited for the future of this technology and the value it's going to bring to businesses. So at the beginning, I mentioned this webinar was only 30 minutes, so it's short and sweet. So we're going to conclude this discussion at the moment. I just want to say a huge thanks to all our experts for their time and insights. Everyone shared a huge amount of interesting information, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to have lots to think about. And also a big thanks to all of you who joined us and listened in. We will be sending a follow-up email with the webinar recording. In the meantime, if you want to find out a bit more about us, you can visit us at altair.com, and all the ways you can get in contact with us will be shared in the chat. So thanks again. Until next time.